Hello, everybody, and welcome to Todd's Cloudy Podcast, episode 453, recorded live Wednesday, March 25th, 2020. I, of course, am your host, Todd, held up in my bunker here in beautiful and sunny Ames, Iowa. We'll start with the production notes. We are a couple of episodes behind in the production notes. This is episode 453, like I just mentioned, and I've got episode 450, which will go out today, and 451 is partially produced as well. So I talked last week how I kind of stagger them out so I don't drop like 6 in a day. What ends up happening, though, is I will do that for a couple days and then I'll forget, and so I'll end up doing a bunch at a time. So that's where I'm at right now. I've done a couple over the last couple days, and I'll try to get caught up. But that's going well. Going to be caught up soon. It is funny. So, of course, the topic of most of the discussion today is going to be the COVID-19 outbreak and how it has impacted everything in our lives, but specifically technology. And it's funny going back and looking at some of those earlier podcasts that were recorded in January, recorded in February before all this happened. And it is very much like one of those, like this is a turning point. Like there are events that happened before the COVID-19 outbreak and then now. And it's been interesting seeing the things that we talked about and all of that. But I will get the production caught up here pretty quickly. The other thing that's working in your guys' favor is the MVP renewal process is going on. I have to have all of that stuff in before the end of the week, and the number of podcasts that I've put out, the number of views and all that are all part of that. So I need to get all those podcasts out before the 31st when I have to turn my paperwork in. So everybody's going to win. It's going to be great. So I will get those out soon. The topics, of course, everything and everybody is talking about COVID-19. It will be interesting to see how people look back on this. It's a pretty crazy time, and there's a whole lot to say about it. Of course, I'm going to try to keep this all from a technical perspective, but it has really forced a lot of people to move into technologies and do things that they were curious about before but haven't had a chance or the motivation to experience. And so it's a very interesting time to be around. And one of the things that I want to start off with, and this is something that really came to my mind a month or so ago, was how Microsoft has done a great job leading the way in the COVID-19 response. This, and I don't want to get into any real political things, but this started in China, obviously in 19, hence COVID-19, but it really became a big deal, in January or so. And last week was supposed to be the MVP summit in Seattle. So, the Redmond campus and all that. And that was going to be a big in-person event. There's 3,000 and some change MVPs from all over the world, every corner of the world. And it's a great event, and every MVP loves it. And it's a little bit about talking to the product teams and the product groups at Microsoft, but it's also a whole lot more about catching up with your friends and having all those great hallway conversations. Most MVPs have some amount of exposure to the product teams at Microsoft. And so I've been an MVP now for 13, 14, 15 years, I forget exactly. And that has changed a lot. Back when I was first an MVP and first going to the MVP summit, the amount of information that we would get about the products at the summit was amazing because there were these 3-year product cycles. And so depending on where in the product cycle that particular summit was, we might get, an early look at a beta, or we might get, right after something's come out, we might get a bunch of lessons they've learned. It was always really great. But now that stuff is constantly coming out and they're constantly talking about it, that kind of information isn't as pertinent or valuable anymore. And so I don't want to belittle or diminish the value that we have from the product teams, because we do get a bunch of stuff from that, but it has become very much a social event. Microsoft made the very tough decision 3 weeks or so before the MVP summit to turn it into an online-only event. A lot of folks are saying cancel. I have certainly described it as canceling it. Technically, it wasn't canceled. It was turned to an online-only event. But back then, even then, they realized that they just couldn't responsibly have all of those people in one place at one time and from all of those places. And they made the very hard decision 3 weeks before the summit to turn it into an online-only event. And that had a bunch of really negative consequences for them. They got a lot of pushback for that. And at that time when they made that decision, they were a little ahead of the curve, and I don't think a lot of people understood what we were up against. And so it was tough for them to understand why that was the decision, the right decision at the time. The other thing was for the Microsoft employees themselves to figure out how to put on an online event like that at that scale with all of those different people all over the world, time zones and all that. Because when you have it in person, everybody's on the Pacific time zone. But everybody's staying home. Now you've got, 23 other time zones to worry about at least. And so the content team had to figure out how to deliver all of that and put it together. And the MVP team had to figure out how to, put the site up and the scheduling and all that. It was a Herculean effort, to say the very least, and painful for everybody involved, especially the folks at Microsoft. But they did the hard thing, and it was the right thing to do. And I think we would look back now, and this is only going to be last week. I think we would recognize that it would have been a disaster had they not done this. Like they were very ahead. So I was disappointed and a little upset, but completely proud of Microsoft for taking that step. And then shortly after that, they said not only are the MVPs not going to be coming to campus, but they made everybody who could work from home for the next, the 3 weeks, a month. I don't know what that date is now, but again, trying to quell the spread of the COVID-19 virus. That wasn't enough though. Microsoft stepped up again, and they said now since all these people, Microsoft and whoever, are going to be working from home, they're going to take the free tier of Teams, and Teams has had a free tier for a very long time, and give it all of the premium benefits for the next however long. I think they said 6 months. Don't quote me on that, but I think it was something around 6 months, to ease companies into working from home. Because a lot of companies now are doing this that had no plans for doing it or didn't have any plans for doing it at this scale. Taking your entire workforce and making them work from home is not something that you should decide and implement in the span of 7 to 14 days. But a whole bunch of companies all over the world were forced with that exact decision, and they had to make it. And so Microsoft putting Teams out there and making the free SKU have all these great features was a really nice thing. Now, of course, they did it for marketing reasons. Of course, they're hoping that a bunch of those customers will decide to pay for the free features afterward. There is no such thing as a selfless act, but they did it very quickly. You could tell that their heart was in the right place when they did that. So I was just amazed by that. Microsoft then donated like $1 billion towards some health efforts in the Puget Sound area. They are doing a bunch for their employees to make sure that everybody's taken care of there. They released the Power Apps framework for the emergency response thing that we talked about last week. They have really done a whole lot for this, and they keep doing. They've just really stepped up. So a bunch of other companies doing great things. I don't want to diminish any of their efforts either, but Microsoft has really stepped up, and they've always been one step ahead. They've always just really thought about that. So kudos to them. I've really been proud to be a part of that ecosystem. Now, that has resulted in a bunch of things, and I'm going to jump on the bandwagon a little bit there. So again, we've got this workforce now, and I was listening to a Freakonomics podcast. I listen to a lot of those kind of podcasts, and the Freakonomics podcast was on working from home and what its efficacy is, and all the economics part of it, not the tech part, but the economics part. And one of the guests on there was a professor that has been studying working from home and telecommuting and all that, and he said that in the United States, 5%, before all this happened, 5% of the workforce worked from home 5 days a week. So not somebody who says I work from home 2 days a week or I get to work from home Fridays, but 5% of the workforce was people like me who work from home 100% of the time. That was a month ago. Now, of course, that number is going to be a lot bigger, but that shows the amount of change that happened in the workforce, again, in the span of 7 to 14 days. So there have been a ton of blog posts that people have put out about how to work from home, changes you should make, schedule-wise, how to cope with it, how to, hardware suggestions, things like that. Those are all very valuable, and I don't want to jump on the bandwagon. And it's funny, that has happened enough now that people are mad about it. They're like, if I have to read another how to use Teams at home, it's not a bad thing. Like, of course, people are going to publish that, and people need that. People need to consume that. 95% of the population was not working from home every day of the week. There's a lot of people that need to hear that information. So I don't want to talk about that much, though there are some things out there that I've had customers ask me about. But I am more interested in how the admin side works of that. Because now, you've got obviously this whole workforce that is working from home and was not prepared for that. They were not trained for that. They didn't have the right hardware for that. And all of a sudden they were told one day, hey, you can't come into work anymore, work from home. That's challenging. And I was joking in the chat room earlier, I've got a new office mate now. My wife's company has sent everybody home. And so for the foreseeable future, I've got her working here. But for me as a consultant and an IT pro, it's more interesting to me how the IT department has had to change and pivot, because like I said, this is not a change that any company would have been able to do or wanted to do or would have been responsible for them to do if they, to roll this all out in a span of 2 weeks. So there are all kinds of things around, what products to use. Some companies had some folks that work from home, so they already had some platform to work off of, but a lot of companies didn't. Or some companies had a few people that were trying out Teams, a couple of people that work from home, but now everybody's doing it all day long. So they have to figure that out, and they have to figure it out from an infrastructure standpoint. Now you've got network concerns, you've got authentication, identity concerns, you've got hardware concerns for people. What are they using? Do they have laptops? Do they have webcams? Do they have whatever? And one of the, so I'm more interested in the nerdy pieces, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that later. But as I was talking to people, my own coworkers and that, about what things admins who've been immediately thrust into this unpreparedly, this full company Teams admin mode, what things they should be checking out. And I was looking for, again, the network stuff and all that. And two of my coworkers independently were like, support. They've got this whole new workforce that has no idea how to do all this. They need great customer support. They need great end user support. And that just kept coming up. And it was not something that I had thought of. It wasn't really the kind of things that I was looking for, but it is an important piece of any of this, is trying to figure out how to guide all of your users and all of your users at once. No phased approach. No, we're doing this office this week, or we're doing accounting this week. No, everybody starting right now is working from home, and remembering that those people are nervous and confused about just what's going on in the world, and now this whole work from home thing, and they just need a lot of help getting that up and going. So I see some folks in the chat room talking, and folks have been in the chat room. Kevin's mentioned that that's all he's been doing for the last 2 weeks, is deploying Teams to all of his teams. And so I'm curious what kind of customer support challenges you've had, or any of that. I'm going to do some kind of a webinar about this. I'm still gelling all my ideas on it, but there are a lot of those things that we need to keep an eye out for. Again, network use. I've seen a lot of companies are now moving to VPNs hurriedly, which is, again, never a great idea to do these things quickly. And don't know about things like split tunneling, this ability to have your corporate data when you're VPN'd in go across the VPN connection, but all of your internet data go out your own internet connection, so that your VPN concentrator at your company isn't taking all of that, all those funny cat videos and all of that. So there's just all these painful things. And how do you do authentication with VPNs? Do you do two-factor? Which two-factor do you use? We've got a customer that originally had come to us about something else in Office 365, but then immediately, within the last couple of weeks, because of changes with workforce and all that, they want to implement MFA, multi-factor auth, right away as part of this whole thing. So it's been, it can be really challenging to get all this going. So again, I hope to have a blog post or a webinar or something about the admin side of all of this. The end user side is very, again, very, very important, but I think also pretty well covered. But the admin side has been pretty interesting. So I bring a couple of these up. So the Intranet Zone is a podcast that Mark Cashman and Chris McNulty do. And two of my friends that work at Microsoft, they recently had a podcast on crisis management and remote work and how to do all that. And again, they have been on the front lines of that both being Microsoft employees and seeing how Microsoft has handled that, which again I think is very well, and then also being on one of the Office 365 teams that is supporting this from the back end level. So that's some interesting stuff. I haven't listened to that all the way through yet, but that's going to be a good one. Another thing that I was going to mention is, and again, I'll talk to this a little later. A bunch of events have been canceled or postponed. One of them was going to be a Teams Thursday event. So my coworkers, Mark Anderson and Julie Turner, they do a bunch of SharePoint Saturday in New England kind of things. There's a user group up there. They were going to have a Teams Thursday event. And initially it was going to be in person, and then it was going to be postponed. And then I don't know what the current status of it is, because I wasn't going to go out because I'm, not out there. But they've decided that while they're working with this, they're going to do some free Teams webinars. So you can go to, of course, this will all be in the show notes, the intranet zone and all that. toddclinton.com/podcast453. They're going to have these a couple times a week on some Teams things. And I think this is going to be more end-usery things. I don't know. I haven't looked at the syllabus yet. But check those out. That's a great way to kind of get up to speed. I'm spending a lot of time at my desk with things like this kind of going on in the background on my big TV up there, just hoping to pick it up with osmosis. So hopefully you guys have the ability to do that. To do that as well. One of the things that I have had to implement at the Clint office is like a FreeBusy sort of indicator, but for the whole house. So not only do I have this new coworker, and she's been the best as far as new coworkers go, couldn't be happier with my new coworker, but I also have some other coworkers upstairs who are remote learning. So I've got a house full of kids now. Iowa, as of today, as of March 25th, has postponed school until April 15th or April 14th, whatever that is, the Monday after, so April 13th, Monday after Easter. A lot of states in the country, I just saw this morning that North Carolina, South Carolina, I forget which one it was, has canceled school through the rest of the year. Virginia has done it. Kansas has done it. So I may have these new noisy coworkers for many, many months. We have to see. But fortunately, my wife and I are fortunate in this. We have my office in the basement, and there's more room in the basement, so that's where my new coworker has set up temporarily, and the kids can be sequestered upstairs. But they need to know when it's not okay to come downstairs, because I'm doing a podcast, and right now my wife's on another conference call, so we can't be bothered. And so I had to find some way to do that. Now, those of you that know me know that I have never found a situation that I couldn't make more complicated by over-teching it, and this is no exception. This process, the process I'm going to talk about now, is in its infancy. I will make it more and more complicated as the time goes by. But we have a door to the basement, that we keep shut all the time. And what I ended up doing was I had laying around a string of LED lights. So it's those, cheap LED lights that you get on, AliExpress or whatever. I've got, I'm not exaggerating, probably 8 to 10 rolls of those things just laying around. So I think it's a 12-foot string that I have up there. And then I hooked it up to a controller, and that controller is internet connected. So on my phone or with my digital assistants, whose name I can't say, I can set the color of that so it lights the entire door up, red or green. For those of you that are friends of mine on Facebook, you've seen those pictures. I plan on blogging that. It's a pretty ugly solution, honestly, and I haven't got it quite nearly as complicated as I want it to be. But for those of you in the chat room, I will bring the pictures over. So now I've got that set up. Now what I plan to do is figure out a way to make that more automated. So right now I can, so that device on my network is called Busy Lights. It's lights that tell whether the office is busy or not. And so right now I can say, she who shall not be named, set busy lights to red, and that tells the kids upstairs, don't come downstairs because mom and dad are busy. Set them to green, turn them on, turn them off. I can do all that with my voice. But all of the information about whether those lights should be on or not is already in Office 365 for me. Now, the challenge that I have is my wife's company doesn't use Office 365. So if I want to connect it to both of our calendars so that it comes on and off automatically, That's going to take some jiggling, but I'm in the process of automating that so that I can do that. Had a couple of people ask about how I did it, so I will probably publish that blog post today. The equipment's pretty cheap. I mean, I'm thinking all in, I'm about $20-25 into this solution. And again, it leverages digital assistants that I already have and a phone that I obviously already have. So it's pretty easy to set, but the process for setting was pretty manual. Now, the other side effect is my kids think those lights are great. And so we've had all kinds of fun because they can strobe and flash and change colors and all that. So it's been a big fun here at the house. And so I will probably do that now. There are a million solutions like that already out there. And so I don't want to post them all. The other thing is, one of my pet peeves, when I'm king of the world, there'll be some changes, make no mistake. One of them will be that you cannot publish a blog post or an article on the internet without the date that it was published being prominently displayed right at the top. Now, I know some folks out there were like, but I don't want to do that. When we put dates out there, people don't read them because the articles look old. That's exactly the purpose. That's exactly the reason. As a reader, I don't want to read tech things that are 3 years old. Right. So the reason I bring that up is because people have been doing this, having FreeBusy Indicator lights outside of their office for about 100 years, roughly. The first ones were steam powered. It was very, very difficult. But the cloud environment is moving so quickly that even an article that's 6 months to a year old is probably not the best way to do a thing. And as a blogger, my blog has 800 and some posts on it now. I never go back and read old blog posts to see if they're still accurate. Now I can go into Google Analytics and I can see which posts are getting the most hits. And if something bubbles up that's obviously, I'm like, oh, that's changed, I will go back and change it. But most of the time, I set it, forget it, and if I'm not using that blog post, then I'm just not going to see it. So a bunch of those blog posts that were posted in 2017 and were the bee's knees back then and the best way to do something, they're not the greatest ones now. And so I'm not going to post a bunch of those, but one that I did see here recently that I was a big fan of used Teams, which is, it will actually use the Microsoft Graph. He calls it Teams in the thing, Teams Presence Indicator, but it's really the Microsoft Graph. Uses the Microsoft Graph, uses a couple of Azure services, uses a Raspberry Pi, and then controls Philips Hue lights. And that is all of the things that I have in this house. I have all of those things at my disposal. Now, the lights that I'm using around my door are not Philips Hue lights, but they have I've got some other hooks that I might be able to get in there. But that's a really great post, and it is, and I've got it in another window here. The guy that posted that is, oh boy, come on, Chrome, he doesn't have his name at the top, so I can't see it. The blog is jpda.dev. And the guy's name is in his Twitter handle, and I don't have Twitter up right now. But a shout out to him for coming up with that. That has been a pretty fun little thing, and I'm going to take pieces of that. So John Patrick Dandison, and so I found that tweet that he tweeted about that, and so I sent it out and said, I wish I was as smart as this guy. And then Ralph Miller just tweeted, I wish I was half as smart as this guy. So yeah, it's a pretty cool thing. So what I will probably do is pick and choose pieces of his solution to find out what I want to use for that. A couple of things that I want to talk about in regards to that. Number one, and this is a funny thing because I do it all the time, so it's that curse of knowledge. I think that everybody needs to do, knows how to do this. But as I have little kids and I'm explaining things to them, it's clear. If somebody just says, make a FreeBusy Indicator light that, automates itself based on your calendar, that's a pretty complicated thing. And so what I love about his blog post and what I will do is that it's broken down into steps, because that is not a single thing. That is, 4 or 5 discrete steps. And so when it's when you're trying to figure out these things, these big complicated things, break it down into individual steps. So he's got a step on, here's how I get the presence out of graph, period. That's all that it does. So if I'm not using Philips Hue lights or I'm not doing whatever, I've got this step that just gets the data out of graph. And then he's got the step that says, now that I've got this data, here's where I'm writing it into Azure so that I can go back and look at it. That's great. Now I've got the piece that just writes data to Azure. And then he's like, here is the process that reads the data from Azure and does a thing, So that's great. And then here's how I actually control my Philips lights. So the first thing that I want to say to folks is, for any of these kind of crazy, complicated things, technical things, whether it be this or something in PowerShell or whatever, taking this seemingly impossible task and breaking it down into chunks of things that you do know how to do, and then mixing and matching those chunks is a great way to solve these kind of problems. So if you can find a solution that's close to what you want, but not exactly what, maybe you can find the other piece somewhere else. So breaking large tasks down, eating the elephant one bite at a time, as I think is how it's often talked about. So that is a great thing. And his blog post is set up very well to help compartmentalize all of those individual tasks. So I love that. The other thing that I have found as I'm writing with this blog post about the door that I've got set up in my house is putting links to where to buy the pieces, because that's what really, people that have not done this kind of thing, they want to be, and I don't mean this in a bad way. They want their hand held. They don't want to see buy a string of LED lights. They want to see, this is the string of LED lights that I'm using, and here's a link to it on Amazon or AliExpress or whatever. So, and I'm the same way when I consume things. I don't want to have to put a whole lot of time into it. And so I'm putting those links together, and because of this project and some other projects that I'm working on, it has become very clear that with all the COVID-19 stuff going on, it's taking a lot longer to get things than we're used to. Now, that depends a lot on the vendor and what the thing is. If you're trying to buy, N95 masks, well, yeah, you're probably going to get some in about September. So it depends on what that is. But what I found is with Amazon specifically, which is where I buy most of my stuff these days, things have gotten very long, and it's not the things you would think of like medical stuff or toilet paper or whatever. It's really innocuous things. For instance, I recently did a whole big rewiring project in my house, Cat 6 and power everywhere. It's delightful. I've got holes all over my walls. Love it. But one of the things that I'm doing is for the TVs hanging on the wall, and there are many, I'm running HDMI cables into the wall and putting HDMI jacks by the floor. Excuse me. So that way, if I want to hook up a Nintendo or something else, something that's not going to be permanently behind the TV, like a Roku box, I don't have to pull the TV out and string a cable or whatever. There's just going to be an HDMI jack on the floor, and I can set a table or something in front of it and do everything there. So I've been doing that and running those around, and I found myself getting low on HDMI cables. Now, being a pack rat, being a hoarder, I'm in good shape. I've got HDMI cables coming out my ears, but I'm running low on some lengths of HDMI cables. So 2 or 3 days ago, I went out to Amazon and bought 6-foot Amazon Basic HDMI cables. So that's probably not the most popular, the most common length. 3-foot is probably the most common, but 6-foot is a pretty common length of HDMI cable. I ordered it maybe March 21st, 22nd. The estimated delivery date on those cables, May 4th. May 4th through the 13th, as a matter of fact. So 6 weeks out for HDMI cables. So I bring that up for a couple of reasons. Number one, if you're going to do any kind of projects like this, don't procrastinate. I am a horrible procrastinator, and now that's kind of biting me in the butt, because some of the things that if I'd have ordered them a week earlier, they would have gotten here 5 weeks earlier. So if you're thinking about doing any of these kind of things or any kind of purchases, do them now. And I don't mean this as a scare tactic. I'm not worried about running out of HDMI cables or anything like that. But just as companies are shifting supply lines and shifting resources, things like my beloved HDMI cables are going to be a lower priority. So I recognize that. Part of that, and the second reason I wanted to bring this up, is because Amazon has started shifting their priorities. So they have looked at, Amazon is not a single entity. They've got warehouses all over the country, and their warehouses stock their goods, and their warehouses also stock third-party goods, which is how you can get Amazon Prime, the 2-day delivery on things that you don't buy from Amazon, that you buy from somebody else. So one of the things that Amazon has done is they've started prioritizing who gets space in their warehouses and what products get space in their warehouses. And obviously, and I don't know where the nearest Amazon warehouse is to me, but if those HDMI cables, and Ross is having the same problem, if that warehouse is close to capacity, Amazon may decide that those HDMI cables didn't make the cut, and maybe food did, or blankets or something like that. And so now my HDMI cables aren't coming from Omaha or Kansas City. Now they're coming from Idaho or Kentucky or something like that. So while it's a pain in my butt to not get my cables right away, it's because they're thinking smart and they're trying to prioritize stuff. I completely get it. Now, Ross in the chat room mentioned he had the same problem with Amazon, but then he went to Monoprice and got them in 3 days. So that was the next thing I was going to bring up. Ross, are you looking at my OneNote? Because that's not cool. So Amazon, since they have such a large breadth of products, they have the flexibility to do this moving around and the ability to do it. So if you have something that you want to buy, like HDMI cables, or my coworker, my new beautiful coworker, needed a new office chair because, well, there was no office chair there before. So like always, we go out to Amazon, we look at them, and it was, lead time was whatever, far longer than she was willing to wait. So then she switched over to Wayfair. Now Wayfair only ships furniture. So there is no ability for toilet paper to move to the front of the line at Wayfair. So she's getting her chair here in a couple of days. Monoprice is a great place to go get those HDMI cables. And honestly, Ross, when I ordered those cables, it was late at night. I didn't even think about it. But had you been there looking over my shoulder and suggested ordering them at Monoprice, I probably would have. So that's kind of my second piece of advice. If you've got something that you want to order and one place has a long lead time on it, like Amazon, think of looking at a specialty place like Monoprice, and you might be able to get your thing quicker. So there's a lot of changes going on in society in all kinds of aspects, and so that's just one of them. And again, it's frustrating and all of that, but I get it. I'm glad they're doing it. I've been talking to folks, and again, having kids, I've been checking in with them every couple of days. How you feeling? What's going on? Are you scared? That kind of thing. And I was talking to one of my kids the other day about it, and she said, "Well, I'm scared, and this is why." And so we talked about why she's scared, and she said, "Are you scared?" And I'm like, I'm not scared. I think the term that I would use to describe what's going on right now for me, how I feel, is just annoyed. It's just a hassle because of all the things that we can't do, and but I'm annoyed, and it's these kind of things. The whole I have to wait 5 weeks from HDMI cables. That's the kind of stuff. But considering what's going on, the fact that annoyed is how I feel, I'm pretty fortunate in all that. So just it's been interesting seeing how things have changed. I have been constantly impressed with a lot of the things that have been going on. Things are continually changing, and it's funny. Today's the 25th. It'll be a couple days before I get this out. Most of this information will probably be old because of just how fast things are changing. But I've been really impressed with how a lot of companies have stepped up and helped. Oh, so another thing that Microsoft did when they emptied their campus is they have a bunch of people who are hourly workers and contract workers that work at the cafeterias and things like that. And they said, you can't work here anymore because we want everybody to be safe, but we're going to pay you anyway. That is amazing. That is a great thing for a company to do. That is not easy for them. I'm sure payroll is a big part of their expenses, but the fact that they're doing that is amazing. And they're not the only ones doing it. A bunch of other places are doing it. So man, the stories of companies and people stepping up has just been incredible. So kudos to everybody that have done that. Devin mentioned that he can't go to the gym, so that's annoying. Also for me, that is annoying. I haven't been able to go to the gym, and it's not quite warm enough here in Iowa for me to run outside all of the time. I'm kind of a wimp. Normally, I think of the floor to where I want to go outside to run is 50 degrees with about a 1 mile an hour wind, lower temperature or higher wind, and I'm out. But my gym closed here a week ago, state orders, so I've not been able to do that. So one of the things that we talked about is I decided to order a treadmill. So I've been kicking that idea around for a couple of months. Treadmills are not inexpensive, and there's a lot of decisions: what size, what company, what features do you care about? And then if you're really going to plan ahead and pay attention to all of this, then you have to think about things like, what clothes am I going to drape on this treadmill after I quit using it? So there's a lot of things. So I had not ordered said treadmill, and also I knew that with spring coming up, I would be running outside more, and I much prefer running outside, so I didn't order the treadmill. Well, our governor wisely decides that all gyms should be closed down for a while, and so I'm like, all right, today's the day. So I go in to order my treadmill. 3-week wait. Oh my God. So had I ordered my treadmill in January, like my coworker suggested that I should, I would be feeling much better. So Devin, I feel your pain. I can't go work out the way that I want to. But that was my first foray into, wow, things are really taking a long time now. So it's an interesting place to be. I've been trying to stay positive through all this and help folks out, because I know that if I was in this situation and I was having a tough time, millions of you guys, dozens of you guys would step up to help me out. So I'm trying to help out where I can with that. One of the saddest side effects of all of this, and this just breaks my heart, is that a bunch of the conferences that I was going to speak at have been canceled, postponed. But if it's an annual conference and it's being postponed to next year, isn't that the same as the 2020 event being canceled? So the SharePoint conference that was supposed to be in May in Las Vegas made the incredibly hard decision to postpone the 2020 conference to 2021. Getting some word from some other conferences. I don't know which ones are public yet, so I don't want to say any of them. Had a user group thing in Omaha that I'm just going to be doing next week. That is now online only. That has been tough for me. I hate the process of traveling. I hate the stress of going to the airport and all of those things. I despise it all. I travel a lot, and I've traveled a lot for a lot of years, so I've had a lot of problems. I've seen a lot of things. I hate the process of traveling. But I love going to new places, and I love meeting people in person. I just love it. And so I'm really disappointed in all of this. So the MVP Summit went away. The SharePoint Conference went away. My drive to Omaha went away. And some others are going away, and that's been very difficult. And again, I have to step back and talk about how fortunate I am. It stinks for me that I don't get to go to Vegas in May and hang out with a bunch of you folks and have some fun. But the event organizers are just, they're pulling their hair out. They don't know what to do. This is such a nebulous problem. And they don't want to cancel these events. They don't want to cancel them for monetary reasons, but they also don't want to cancel them because they love doing this. And so Mark Rackley with the North American Collab Summit, and his was supposed to be, I think, this week or right now, maybe. Obviously, he had to postpone it. And I was saying on Twitter, I think, or maybe Facebook, that that was one of the bellwethers for me that this was a big deal, that I felt bad for Mark Rackley. I never feel bad for Mark Rackley, and I felt bad for him having to move his event. So his event is tentatively moved to September, I think, down in Branson. The good news is, when he had it, I was not going to be able to attend because of some other things I had going on. But if it's in September, I might be able to attend. I think it's tentatively scheduled for the week after Ignite. But it has been, so I know a lot of these people that run these conferences, Mark, Lyman at the SharePoint conference, and a bunch of folks that run other smaller conferences. And I just feel horrible for those guys. Not only because they have an immediate concern, do you cancel an event in May? Well, a month ago, maybe not, but now, yeah, probably. Do you cancel an event in July? Who knows? And the tough part is not only, can we get together at that time? So is it responsible or safe to get a couple thousand people at an event in May? But those things aren't planned and set up, on a dime. So if for that event to go on in May, there's 2 months worth of work that has to be done, and that work has to be done with people that may or may not be working and with groups that may or may not be able to get together. So how do you even begin to figure that out? What's the waterfall look like that makes, so I really feel bad for those folks. My heart goes out to them. And I think we're a ways away from the end of that, that downfall. So I think we're going to see a lot more online presentations. And again, if you're listening to this and you've got a user group or whatever and you want an online speaker, I am happy to do those kind of things. So reach out to me. I'm at Todd Clint on Twitter. You can email me, whatever. But that is just watching all the different places that Hansel. But my heart breaks for all of those people because I really wanted to do some of these events. So that is all of the bad news that I have for everybody right now. Trying times, strange times for sure, but if anybody has any questions on how to roll things out or how I make my basement lights red or green, by all means, reach out to me. I'm happy to help in these times. We're very much all in this together. Plan on continuing the podcast. Again, Shane's got stuff going on, and now he's got the same problems. He's got kids running around. It's crazy. But I probably will be bringing some guests on in the coming weeks to kind of break up the monotony so that you guys don't have to suffer through the drone of my voice for 40, 45 minutes. But thanks everybody. Keep strong. Again, if you need anything, if there's anything I can do, reach out and help. And until then, I will see you all next Wednesday for the next podcast. Thanks everybody. Stay safe.